Hello, and welcome to our session, Using Existing Problems as a Collaborative Tool. My name is Katie Miller, and I am joined by my colleague.
I'm Lauren Keough, Head of Research Engagement at University of Central Florida Libraries.
And I'm the Department Head for Learning Engagement at the University of Central Florida Libraries. So today, we're going to talk about the process and some of the activities we use to create a collaborative culture between two previously siloed departments who now have to work closely together. For a series of targeted meetings and specific exercises, we were able to identify existing problems in our current structure and work towards solutions that increased camaraderie between the two departments. Before we begin, we want to briefly mention the Code of Conduct for the Charleston Library Conference. Please visit the website to read the full text. In today's session, we will give you a brief overview of the challenges we face, reorganizing our division, the exercises we use in an attempt to solve these problems, and what we learned in the process. Let's start with a little background about our institution. The University of Central Florida is a relatively young university. It was founded in 1963. Since that time, it has grown to one of the largest institutions in the country with a student population of over 70,000. The university has had some growing pains as well. It currently has the lowest state funding per FTE student and the lowest rate of faculty per 1,000 students. The library itself mirrors this with less than half as many faculty as compared to the University of Florida. And the University of Florida has a current enrollment of around 56,000 students. As part of this growth, the departments within the university, within the academic engagement division at UCF Libraries have seen a number of changes, including quite a few name changes. Currently, we are broken into two departments, learning engagement and research engagement. Prior to the summer of 2024, the responsibilities of the two departments were broken up along clean lines with little collaboration between the two departments. The culture of the two departments were also very different. The Learning Engagement Department collaborated heavily with each other and used a team-based approach to provide instruction and host outreach events. Librarians in the Research Engagement Department focused on individually supporting their designated subjects. The Learning Engagement Department has been under my leadership since 2020. My co-presenter, Lauren, started as the Research Engagement Department head in the summer of 2024. Before this, the Research Engagement Department had a lot of turmoil with two different interim department heads for the past few years before Lauren joined us. Shortly after Lauren started, we were given a directive from the Associate Dean of Academic Engagement to re-envision both departments. The Associate Dean was himself new to UCF Libraries and was waiting for a permanent department head to make changes. The prompt for change was the recognition that not all disciplines at the university were being supported equally. There were inequitable workloads among the librarians, and for the research engagement librarians, there was no one to provide backup to support their subjects. The charge from the Associate Dean was simple in concept: ensure that each academic department and university partner has a designated liaison librarian. Lauren and I then set to work to develop a framework that would support this charge. What we developed was a team-based model where there would be a designated primary and secondary librarian for both academic departments at the university and our university partners. This sounds like a simple change in theory, but in reality, it proved to be very complex. Unfortunately, things did not neatly align in a way where we could find a clear line of demarcation between the learning engagement and research engagement department, as we had in the past. There were simply too many academic departments, too many university partners, and way too many students. We would have to create a blended model to provide service in a way that would be equitable to everyone in the division. Ironically, this was close to the way the division was structured when I joined UCF in 2019. We also had to discover a process to help change the culture between the two departments to foster collaborations who in the past had approached their roles very differently. We wanted to create a process with inclusive decision-making and increased communication, with the ultimate goal of creating alignment in how we provide three pillars of service: research, instruction, and outreach. In an effort to make time and space for this work to occur, we planned out a structured calendar of meetings and retreats. We made a concerted effort to make this process as fun as possible. This was a perfect marriage between my experience as an engagement librarian and Lauren's background with SEED. So first we started with retreat. In retreats, this is where the big work occurred. So we needed to have several hours to establish a new method for us to work together. We put these over the course of the year, strategically placed so that work could get done. And then these occurred pretty much once a semester for several hours at various locations. They could be held both off-site or in the library. Then we had monthly division meetings. So there was additional opportunities for discussion and information sharing across the division with both departments participating. We meet on the last Wednesday of the month for an hour, but we realized that wasn't quite enough time. So we expanded it to an hour and a half in the summer of 2025. Then we also had monthly department meetings. So these department meetings is where we really dove into the details, and we provided an additional forum for librarians to share their viewpoints. We could clarify things that happened during the retreats or during the division meetings. And those were typically set 2 weeks before our AE division meetings. And then we would cancel these if a retreat or a larger division meeting was needed. I'd like now to hand it over to Lauren, who's going to dive into the details on what we did during these meetings.
Thanks so much, Katie, for setting the stage for us. At the end of 2024, kind of as we'd spent a couple of months this revisioning, it was clear that we needed to structure the time to do the work of revisioning for our division, somewhat we've already outlined. But in November, you can see from this image, Katie and I met and did a big brainstorming of kind of how the cadence and structure for this work should take place. So we did, what should happen in the end of the year, what should happen in the spring semester, summer, and going forward. So we began meeting somewhat regularly, we still meet regularly, to plan out the schedule for accomplishing this work. The image on this slide shows the blocks of time beginning in December for our retreats and other activities that would occur throughout the semester. As we worked together, we also worked with our associate dean throughout the process to plan various milestones, exercises, key meetings, and plans to accomplish the revisioning. We're going to definitely go into lots of detail about what some of that work was. One thing to note is that we won't currently go into the detail about kind of our background work together, but really just focusing on the way that we included and really did inclusive decision making to bring the entire division into the planning of this process. So that's our fun brainstorm. And then we did turn it into a more linear timeline that was a bit more digestible. But in the fall 2024 season, we really had our division and department meetings as our standard kind of way of working together. But then we branched out and in December had our first big retreat, which was really focused on team building, how to get together into the different kind of teams that might form out of this revisioning. We talked a lot about kind of the vocab and our pillars of service and setting our work expectations. And then we moved forward into actually kind of implementing this work in the spring semester and summer semester, and had our new annual assignment start right before the summer semester to really kind of get into our new configurations, right? All the way to currently in the future, that's funny, currently in the future, but planning for the future. In December, we'll have our final retreat of the revisioning. This was the first kind of big calendar that was shared with our departments, right? And it gives you a little bit more nuanced of the phases and kind of meeting together in the various ways that we would meet would be kind of through our AE meetings, then our department meetings, and then kind of the interactive pieces. So we really tried to stage both the kind of delivery of information, the feedback loop, analyzing that information, and then kind of redistributing and kind of building upon the revisioning with all of the feedback that was happening. And you can see even further into the future on this timeline was in January, February 2026, we're going to kind of rework as needed and see how this is going for us in action. Right, so just kind of going linearly through the process, we had our first big department meeting to introduce this revisioning, right? So we really wanted to share what our big vision and why we were doing this work, the goals for doing this work, and then defining everyone's role in the new revision department. So we broke this up into kind of the content that was delivered, and then followed it up with an exercise that would kind of respond to that delivery of information. So we did a big think, pair, share. We're both instruction librarians. We love this model of kind of working with learners. And we gave everybody a worksheet to respond to the different pieces of the visioning plan that we gave to folks. So we wanted to ask, what are initial thoughts or feedback do you have in the redefining of the AE vision? What are some specific thoughts or feedback you have about the different areas, such as the goals that we've set out, defining our roles, kind of how we break up the distribution of work, expectations for our service. And as well, we wanted to get feedback on the timeline and kind of get everybody's input into would this be manageable in the time that we're laying it out. We also constantly, and still to this day, ask everybody what else they need to do or know to implement and do this work, right? So it's not just us making decisions in a vacuum. It's kind of everybody's insight is being honored and put into the planning. So that was September in our department meetings. And then in our division meeting, from that worksheet that we shared, we then synthesized everybody's responses. We provided an analysis of those responses so that everybody across the division, because again, we have separate departments and kind of had met in our department groupings. And so we synthesized the feedback and shared more widely across the division what everybody was thinking and feeling about the initial proposal. We also presented 2 models to organize this work into a cluster model where there'd be kind of just teams of librarians working to support one particular college and not really assigned to particular departments, or a more vertical model where there'd be an assigned kind of librarian as the lead for the college, and then primary and secondary librarians in that grouping to support each of the departments within the college. So we presented both of these options and asked for feedback on them both. And we also began at this time to start really looking at our data and our statistics on the various services we offer within those pillars of instruction, research, and outreach activities. So in the analysis, we got information that we wanted to make sure we were prioritizing collaboration and connections. We had to make sure there was administrative support, both from the department heads and from the associate dean and from the other library administration. We continued to kind of get questions about the clarity of what the roles would be, and also just wanting to make sure that there'd be preferences for the departments that folks would support, as well as equity and fairness in the assignments ultimately, right? And we really did try to make this as much data-driven as possible, both the data that we had access to, the quantitative data of our stats, but also the data we were gathering through this kind of feedback loop and inclusive kind of practice of getting everybody's insight into the process. So we did take a deep look at our data as well, which I don't have a graphic for, but just know we gather lots of data in different quantitative ways. So to partner with the content, we also offered 2 activities. The first was kind of pre-work, where we had asked all of the academic engagement librarians to complete a Qualtrics survey. And in that Qualtrics survey, we had all of the colleges and all the departments within colleges and a variety of our campus and university partners listed in this survey. And we'd asked folks, what areas are you interested in maintaining kind of service for? What areas would you like to take on? Are there areas that you absolutely do not want to be supporting? And so we could really, again, in this kind of effort to be collaborative and include everyone's insight here, we really wanted them to tell us kind of what they wanted the assignments to be. So that was administered. And then we also did this fun activity. I think it's one of Katie and my favorite activities, where you can see this right side image on the screen was on the right image, but on the right side of that image is my name, Lauren. And then I had several pieces of information I shared about what my day-to-day work, I think my day-to-day work is. So I laid that out. And then after I did my initial go at it, we flipped it over and then passed it around the room for everybody else to kind of tell us what they think our day-to-day work is. And the results were really fascinating, right? So there was lots of alignment of like, this is what I do, and other people thought that, but there was lots of other things that people thought we did that were illuminating, right? And we were able to share that with each other. An additional kind of homework activity after the division meeting was to, in preparation for our next division meeting, so between September and October, we asked everybody to take part in this workload analysis. And essentially, it's a really big spreadsheet that outlines all of the different librarian-like activities that kind of fell into buckets of research, instruction, and outreach, a big theme of our service. And folks kind of self-identified in a 100% way, like what volume of time do you spend on this activity? What volume of time do you spend on this other activity? And we put it all together across the entire division. And you can see this pie chart on the screen here kind of representing the bulk of the work we do. So about, in aggregate, 29% of the librarian's time is spent doing research, support, and consultations. 20% is instruction and workshops. 7% is about collection development and collections work. 16% for outreach and liaison work. Professional development and activities is about 20%, and then administrative and managerial is about 8%. So this pretty much, I think, tracked with our assumptions of where our work lied, but it was still interesting to see in aggregate that it kind of affirmed that. But we also had opportunity to kind of look across the different individual responses and see where there were differences in kind of workload and accomplishments. So next, after we did this workload analysis, we looked to the cluster model as well as the vertical model that we had introduced the month before, right? Like how were we going to actually structure this revisioning? So we gave folks, again, the content, we kind of refreshed everybody's memory about the possible cluster model, the possible vertical model, and then we gave them a worksheet. Right. And just to highlight, we were really, every time we kind of delivered content, we wanted to provide an opportunity for that feedback. So it was usually through a worksheet or an activity or a survey. Right. In this worksheet, we asked within this possible cluster model, what are the pros and cons of this type of model? What are some of the ways that we would communicate and kind of establish points of contact for the different areas that you might be assigned to? How would the work be distributed equitably across a cluster model or across a vertical model? And ultimately, who would be accountable kind of to make sure that the work and the programs and the departments were being supported if we were to adopt one model over the other? So that was in October. And then moving through into November, we took a look at the analysis for all the when the AE librarians told us which programs and colleges they wanted to support, which they didn't want to support. We then took this the submissions and we did a fantasy league librarian. I was right around, I think, of course, football season was amping up. We are a football campus, so we were trying to be a little cheeky here. But we provided a suggested grouping of folks, right? So on the screen here, you can see our whiteboard. This is one of the opportunities that Katie and I, we love whiteboards. We got together and we identified each of the colleges, each of the librarians, and then we kind of decided at that point, I think we were moving towards this vertical model where there'd be a college lead, and we were assigning kind of college leads and different roles within the groups, right? So this was our first, based on feedback, we kind of gave everybody the opportunity to provide their input, and then we put it together based on their input, right? And then presented it to everybody, again, for further feedback. So in November, at the division meeting, we did yet again had another worksheet where we gave everybody in writing kind of the Fantasy League assignments. And you can see here on the screen, this is the cover sheet of the worksheet, but it was, just again, college assignments, who in arts and humanities will be the point of contact at the college level, who are the other librarians that are going to be assigned to support the College of Arts and Humanities, and then breaking down for each of the departments, like who's going to support those departments. And we, at that point, had decided on a primary and secondary librarian. So again, we gave everybody the information, the content, and then we offered this worksheet for them to reflect individually. And then we came back together in aggregate to kind of do a little bit of like, let's trade this, or let's go here, or I really don't want to lose that program, or something like that. So we, again, continue to give people opportunity and capacity to provide their feedback and insight on how they wanted these groupings to play out. So the prompt that we gave them as well for this, because I just want to say this is still somewhat a living, breathing document, like these assignments have been made, but there continue to be adjustments because this is an ongoing and iterative process. But we did give them the prompt. We want to create a living, breathing document that must be updated by everyone, right? Again, it's not me and Katie, it's not Tom, our associate dean, it's everybody. So we give everybody access to updating this. It's going to be collaborative, that everyone can write their notes and provide updates on, and they'll know who's doing the work and kind of work with each other to make these decisions. So moving forward now into our first big retreat, which we decided to go off site for. We went to a local public library, which was so fun for everybody. And we really, as you can probably see in the image here, we were trying to start to infuse fun. I guess we were always infusing fun, but we really, I think at this moment, we had a game that we put in and we called it Library Land based on Candyland. And we were off site and kind of all team building together. And we wanted to get everybody together in a fun way, but also in a productive way. So we did this game at the start of our retreat. We revisited our pillars of work that included the research, instruction, and outreach buckets. And we also spent some time talking about the final groupings, right? Because we did this fantasy league, and it is kind of an ongoing process, but we needed to get to a point where it was done enough that folks could start meeting together and kind of making plans, right? So another big activity we did at this retreat was to identify the different areas of work that we do within these pillars, right? So what does it mean to support research activities? Is it desk service? Is it Ask a Librarian staffing? Is it research consultations? Is it working with a small group of students who have a project, right? There's a variety of ways that folks address their work within the research bucket. And then we did this for instruction and outreach as well. And we gave everybody an opportunity to kind of go around the room, write on these sticky notes, spend some time with it. And then we had a little snack break, and then we came back and we did a heat mapping of sorts, right? And everybody was given these dots and stickers and be like, yeah, that's something I do. And yeah, I like that. And like, yeah, that's definitely what goes on in this kind of bucket and category. So again, right, like we were asking folks to contribute to the understanding of what our work is. Then we asked them to respond to each other, and then it informed kind of our decision making. So that was December, and then winter break happened, and we all went away for our lovely holidays. And then we came back and we had another retreat, right? So this was a new concept, but also something we knew we needed to keep the momentum going, right? So we scheduled it so close to the start of the new year, as I said, to not lose the momentum. And so we did a recap of kind of what had taken place from July to December of the year before, and then refocusing kind of where our efforts were going to move in January, right? So communication became a very big theme here. We wanted to know how we were going to communicate within our college groupings, with our primary and secondary groups, with department heads, with the dean. So there's really this kind of lots of discussion around what tools to use. So we do have an image of Microsoft Teams here, and we are a Microsoft campus, so Teams became a huge part of our life and our collaboration. We shared documents, we put surveys and links up, and we also created for each of the colleges a group channel for them to discuss with each other and the entire division. So at the retreat as well, it was the first time that the college groupings that had been kind of assigned had an opportunity to meet together in their groups. Right up until this point, it had still been all division, all hands, kind of everybody talking abstractly about all these things. And then it got to a point where we needed to get into the groups and really start talking a little bit more concretely, right? So they were given this worksheet, another worksheet, love the worksheets. And we gave them the afternoon to get into their college group huddles. We also did some team building and kind of gamification of our activities. Like we had a button making, everybody wore a button and you had to guess what the button represented as that person's secret skill. There were crosswords and word searches, and it was a lot of fun. But also, the work that we had was to really get into our groups and do some team building in those groups. So we asked folks like what role in each of the groups will each member play? Will somebody be the college lead? Will somebody be the primary and secondary? We really wanted to get at that communication, like how will they communicate with each other? How often will they communicate? Will there be meetings? What kinds of activities are required to transition knowledge, right? If somebody's taking on a new role or a new subject area, how would they work with somebody who had previously served that area, right? So we talked a lot about knowledge transfer and, again, communication. We also, I just wanted to say, did a post-session survey on the retreats, right? This was our second big retreat. Katie and I were really interested to find out if these were landing with folks. So we did some assessment as well, just to, again, continue to bring people into the conversation about, is this working for us? And then finally, we moved into our department meeting and talked a lot about forms. Big, complicated flow chart here, but just to know that our data is complex, as I'm sure many of yours are. But we just needed to kind of have these conversations about how we would track our things. Finally, moving into February, we had our division meeting in which we kind of went back to business as usual because our annual assignment was approaching with this new time for making sure we were saying what's going to happen in the next year. We really had to start planning for that annual assignment. So Tom led us in a SMART goal setting session. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And we were also going to be expected to incorporate the newly released UCF Library strategic directions into this. So that was more, again, a business as usual, but still very very collaborative, and everybody kind of participated. And then we did have our biggest and most fun, in my opinion, our retreat in the spring, which actually was scheduled during spring break. So communication continued to be the theme, and we did this wonderful kind of note card exercise where folks were like, we had prompted them with what do they want to do to increase our communication and increase our team building with each other. And I have here a couple of the things that came out of this is now we have regular coffee breakfast calendar invitations on our Outlook calendars. We go for ice cream on dollar ice cream cone Wednesdays, and we have brown bag lunches. We also at this event did the zine. As Katie mentioned, I'm a zine maker. And so I gave everybody an individual zine for them to respond to various prompts, like what brings you joy at work? What challenges you at work, right? What do you like about instruction, research, outreach? Really trying to get at kind of, again, the work that we're doing and reflect on it. And so everybody did that on their own, and then later gave me that feedback. And after our department meeting, which continued to talk about forms and communication, like using LibConnect as a possible tool, we reconvened at our division meeting and had a big recap of the retreat, right? And talked about the schedule of those informal activities that were to really help us build teams and communication practices. And we had Formapalooza, part 3. We kept talking about our data. And then finally, the zine, kind of as a bookend to this, was given back to everybody as a collaborative zine. So everybody had their individual zines where they reflected on the prompts, and then they gave me all their information if they wanted to, and I created a collaborative zine and gave that to folks too. So we were really trying to, again, have this exercise of we're prompting you, you're reflecting, giving us some feedback, and then we put it all together and share back with you. Really moving forward, right? We continue to go back into business in April for our division meeting. We have our, again, new annual assignments that are impending. So it's kind of, again, this process of the normal work now that we have our new assignments kind of goes into implementation. We did have another retreat in the summer, right, in May, and is again focusing on communication. In the kind of time in March, April, we really decided to move forward with LibConnect as a communication tool to be able to send out like fun professional newsletters to our campus constituents. We talked about website updates to kind of represent this revisioning, and that kind of queued us up for our summertime kind of intensive training on LibConnect, which you can see on the screen here, our first newsletter that was sent out in August. But again, everybody inputted their best ideas about what should go into this first email, and it was, again, collaborative in nature. Finally, we had our retreat in August, in which we really started to reflect as much as we could on the revisioning and talked about our meeting cadence. And now that we've had these intensive retreats and this division and departmental cadence, like how's everybody feeling, right? So we're doing this reflective practice, which is going to be ongoing. And we are talking a lot about our meeting structure and how we to continue to do this teamwork together. So we'll have some continued work to do going forward. Just like to leave this image up because it's Katie and I again with our whiteboards and our sticky notes and our Post-it notes. This is what my wall currently looks like in my office. And Katie and I have offices across the way, and we're constantly kind of engaging with this wall. So thank you so much. And I'll hand it back over to Katie.
So what worked? So when we were going through this process, it seemed so laborious and it didn't feel like we were gaining any ground. But now that we've had a chance to kind of look back and see what we achieved, we realized we were actually able to accomplish quite a bit. First of all, we were able to build a cohesive team through these multiple meetings and activities. We didn't get into the details, but able to address some thorny issues from them. So through this collaborative process, other questions came up and we had a way to incorporate them into our regular work. And most importantly, we were able to create some organizational norms to continuously improve what we do. Some unexpected benefits that we received as a part of this work was that we were able to identify some of the invisible labor that was happening that wasn't considered when we sort of conceptualized this to start with. And then again, we were able to really solidify those 3 pillars of research, instruction, and outreach. Although I mentioned that we had a more unified division, we don't yet have a fully unified division. So, these is kind of leaning into a little bit of the things that we still need to work on. We need to continue to work with people to understand the collaborative process itself. Some of our librarians are still having some difficulty adjusting from an independent mindset to a collective mindset, and it creates these unintended barriers to us working together. We continue to struggle during our meetings with balancing the louder voices with the softer voices, and other people are having difficulty adjusting to the new expectations within the divisions, or they're having difficulty with communicating their activities with their colleagues. So, we do see improvement. It's just that when people have worked a certain way for decades in some cases, it's hard to change that organizational culture. So what is our future work? So as Lauren has mentioned, this process is ongoing. An essential piece of this is building that dedicated time for assessment. For our division, it's determining the topics we want to cover. It includes what is working well with the model. And finally, we want to identify what we need to support this model and the work that we do every day. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot of resources that are going to be available as part of this presentation, but if you'd like to know more, please feel free to reach out to us. Our email addresses are listed here. And now we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions.